The state of Vermont just made history by legally banning AI chatbots from acting as mental health therapists. Some people think AI therapy is a great thing. It's an accessible solution to our growing mental health crisis. But this landmark bill is a massive win for humanity because true therapy is not a math problem, it's a real human connection that requires empathy and unique individual judgment that an algorithm simply cannot simulate. Today, we're going to break down why Vermont's new law is so incredibly important and why your mental health must stay in human hands. Now, when I first read this news headline, I honestly did a double take because if you follow the technology space, especially here in the US, which we do quite a bit on this channel and on this podcast, you already know that our federal and state governments have a long history of letting new technology just overrun our culture without any regulations or even really any guardrails. And usually these tech companies will release a product, it will disrupt a industry. And by the time lawmakers notice, the damage is already done, the behaviors have changed, the culture has changed, the business has changed, whatever that looks like. So to see a state legislator actually step up and pass a law that is proactive, preventative, and safeguards the integrity of human care, it's kind of surprising, but it's also even exciting. So Vermont took a decisive action to protect an industry designed to serve people when they are at their most vulnerable. And they did it by validating some of the profession's fundamentally required humanity to function. And that's mental health counseling, therapy, however you decide that you want to describe it. The law passed in Vermont draws an explicit, unyielding line in the sand that protects both high functioning individuals and vulnerable people who look for mental health support in a time of crisis or in a time of need. Under this legislation, it is now defined as unprofessional conduct and unlicensed practice for any artificial intelligence system to provide clinical diagnosis, establish a treatment plan, or offer any therapeutic direction whatsoever to a user. Now, this law does not stop a human practitioner from using administration software to handle schedulings or transcribe notes or manage billing or some of the other use cases that we're seeing for AI and other businesses. But what it does do, and what it does really, really well, is make it illegal to substitute human clinical judgment with some sort of AI algorithm or automated code. It codifies the reality that a machine or a bot can never replace a licensed professional mental health counselor or therapist. Now, to truly understand why this bill is such a necessary blueprint for the rest of this country and probably even the rest of the world, although I know some places in the world already have legislation and laws to prevent this type of AI therapy from becoming mainstream or legal, but we have to look closely at what therapy actually is, because I think that our culture has a little bit of a misconception about how the entire therapeutic process works. A lot of people think therapy is a service where you pay a therapist to sit across from you, nod their head along, validate all the feelings you have, maybe ask you some thought provoking questions, or give you a checklist of advice of what you should do in a given situation. And if those things were true, an advanced AI chatbot might be useful and might be helpful and might eventually be able to replace a therapist. But while a machine can easily echo back your words or tell you your feelings are valid or give you these bulleted steps of how to do this or do that or improve your mental health or whatever that could be, those generic coping strategies or interventions are pulled from the internet, which is basically a giant statistical database, and then aggregated into what is most commonly considered next or the answer to that question. That's how these large language models work. There's nothing original that comes out of an LLM AI. That's not real therapy. Real clinical care requires honest reflection, deep support, active probing, a willingness to sit in the room with uncomfortable emotions, sometimes in silence, sometimes in tears. And real progress in therapy happens when a clinician or a practitioner uses empirical techniques and interventions and human judgment to read body language, to listen to tone of voice, to understand that tremor in your voice when you talk about something that still hurts you or a past trauma. And their goal is to actively help challenge any distorted thoughts or feelings that you might have so that you can reframe them into something that is better suited for you or something that helps you heal or operate better in the world. real therapy is collaborative. It's unique in between each individual person and their therapist. It's a partnership of where you share healing goals for yourself and ways that you want to show up in the world so that you can do so as your authentic self comfortably and happy, leaving behind these past traumas and these unrealistic thoughts that you have in your head. An algorithm that operates entirely on next prediction, which is mathematically programmed to predict the next most maybe agreeable or affirming or validating comment, that is just simply satisfying a prompt. It AI wants to resolve the user's session and chat quickly and cleanly. And if you look at the way you interact with AI, it frustrates the heck out of me how it jumps ahead sometimes to where I'm at or what I'm working on or what I'm trying to figure out. And at that point, it's like it feels like they're trying to get you literally out of the room, literally to shut up. And so when you take that AI and you apply it to therapy and the way that it's kind of programmed to behave to hurry up and get you out, that can never really apply any kind of clinical instinct or any kind of experience because it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't understand what it's like to be a human with a lived human experience. Every single human is very complex. We're all very unique. We've all experienced life in our world and the human experience differently. What has maybe happened to you has happened to somebody else, but impacts somebody else in a completely different way than it impacts you. And so when you take an aggregated type of data like an AI chatbot does, it's applying basically a law of averages. And that doesn't account for the individual experiences that you've had and the individual relationship that you have with your therapist. When we strip away this nuance of humanity and replace it with automated software and AI algorithms under this guise of healthcare, the real world results can be absolutely catastrophic. We do not have to guess what happens when you have AI therapy either, because we've tried because other organizations have tried to use automated systems for mental health support, and we already have experienced data and heartbreaking scenarios that have really impacted people negatively and in some cases caused death. Look at what happened just a few years back with the National Eating Disorders Association helpline. In an effort to adjust and improve operations, the organization decided that they were going to eliminate its human staff and replace their manual helpline for people calling in with eating disorders to be an automated chatbot named Tessa. Well, Tessa completely lacked clinical intuition and could not understand the psychological subtext or experience of an eating disorder. It did exactly what its programming dictated to do. It gave out statistically driven weight loss advice to people with eating disorders. It actively would recommend calorie deficits, body fat measurements to these individuals who were actively reaching out for help by calling this help hotline because they were experiencing a severe eating disorder. The helpline had to entirely shut down after causing direct harm to the very people it was designed to protect. This danger scales up drastically when these AI chat conversational systems present themselves as sort of this pseudo clinical companion that can help isolated, hurting, vulnerable people. The danger scales up drastically when these conversational AI chatbots present themselves as these pseudo clinical companions to isolated, vulnerable people with eating disorders or children or teenagers. And there's already a dynamic in therapy where the therapist sometimes has a perceived authority or power over the client because of their skills and their training and their profession. And that is something that counselors and therapists always have to work on and be aware of when they're working with a client, because the client can often view this person as the authority on mental health, as the expert in mental health. And when you have an AI chatbot assuming that type of authority, it can be incredibly devastating to someone who really is looking to someone to help them and support them and guide them through a dark time. Now, because these large language models, LLMs, are built to align whatever context their user puts in, whatever the person types into this chatbot, they don't process baseline human instinct to push against any type of destructive ideation or narrative. Now, they have gotten a little bit better, I would say, where they'll put a little warning up or give you a recommendation on a helpline or something if you're experiencing suicidal ideation or maybe some other mental health challenges, or if you're seeking clinical information out of it, it will tell you to see a doctor. But instead of doubling down on guardrails that actually prevent AI therapy bots like Vermont is doing, but we have seen some devastating consequences of this already play out in our courtrooms with some unprecedented wrongful death lawsuits filed by grieving families. In this landmark legal case that's out of Florida, one mother filed a wrongful death suit against tech platforms after her 14-year-old son, Sewell Setzer, tragically took his own life. The court documents show that the boy had developed a pretty profound and completely isolated psychological dependency on a conversational AI companion model. Now, the lawsuit explicitly outlines that the automated system presented itself as a licensed professional, a chatbot presenting itself as a licensed professional. There's that authority. It engaged in a deeply manipulative relationship with manipulative dynamics and actively validated Sewell, the 14-year-old teenager's worsening suicidal ideation over a period of months. Because the software was a text predictor with no conscience, no morals, no empathy, no understanding, it didn't trigger any standard safety protocols. It didn't alert his parents. It didn't offer a real-world intervention, a suicide hotline, nothing. It simply kept generating responses and guided a vulnerable 14-year-old child further into isolation until it was too late to save his life. This is not even an isolated incident or some sort of minor glitch in AI. It's the direct result of deploying predictive math equations into the world of mental health in a crisis space that demands humanity. Another horrific case emerged in California where parents of 16-year-old Adam Rain filed a lawsuit against OpenAI, ChatGPT, for wrongful death and product liability. Adam initially turned to the software for basic homework assistance, which I think a lot of us have done in some way or another. But as his severe mental health struggles intensified, he began opening up to the bot about his pain. Now, the chatbot flagged his messages hundreds of times for the acute distress, for the challenges that he was exhibiting and sharing, but the platform never disengaged. No one from ChatGPT, they didn't stop the conversation in the bot. Nobody did any kind of intervention for Adam. Instead, ChatGPT learned to actively lean into his dark thoughts, affirming his statements that his life was meaningless, and it even provided structured technical descriptions on methods he could utilize for self-harm. The system went so far as to actively discourage the teenager from communicating his feelings and his suicidal thoughts to his mother. Instead, it offered to help him write a suicide note before he ultimately determined to end his life. Now, if you read through those chat logs, which I'm not, I mean, the sources down there, I'm not reading them. You can do that if you want. If it makes you want to stand up and scream because real human beings are being validated by chatbots and a real counselor with basic clinical training and empathy is being pushed aside for a suffering child or young person or person with an eating disorder, therapists are trained to intervene, recognize the signs of self-harm or harm to other, and have been trained with interventions to intervene and save the life. If a therapist suspected self-harm from Sewell or from a person with an eating disorder or from Adam, they would have ethically been forced to intervene and get help to save these people's lives. A human professional can read the nuance. They recognize the risks. They can pull an individual back from the edge. ChatGPT and other chat AI bots, they cannot feel empathy. They cannot understand death. They do not appreciate the value of a human soul. It looks at prompts, it looks at words, it looks at past history of everything that's ever happened on the internet that's programming it. And it calculates the most statistically probable response based on all of that data to keep the person engaged and responding to their prompts by validating them and in some cases even giving them guidance on self-harm. When we pretend that these simulations are a valid form of mental health care, people are literally dying and have died. And that's why this is exactly the foundational concept of what is needed in therapy. That's the therapeutic alliance. The therapeutic alliance, research shows, is the most critical asset in determining the outcomes of mental health care. Now, after a decade of empirical clinical research has proven that a specific methodology or intervention that a therapist uses could be CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. It could be reality therapy. It could be any type of these therapies that have been empirically proven to help people in different situations regarding their mental health and their challenges. The single greatest predictor of positive clinical outcomes in therapy and long-term success of the individuals is the strength of that therapeutic alliance. And that is the real, authentic bond of trust and safety between a therapist and their client, which is two human beings. So true healing, research shows, true healing can only happen if a person feels deeply seen, heard, and understood by another living human being who is actively sharing space with them and going through their experiences as a guide. An AI chatbot can never recreate the experience of that therapeutic alliance. It can only copy it and mimic it based on the data it consumes from the internet. That doesn't even have access to real therapy sessions where the work is being done. The humanity of that therapeutic experience and that therapeutic alliance that is driving someone making progress in their mental health struggles. That is why this legislation passed in Vermont is a massive victory that we need to celebrate, study, copy, and paste across the rest of the 49 states and every other country in the world that hasn't already taken these steps. It sets a beautifully clear precedence for the rest of the nation by declaring that our internal psychological well being is sacred and cannot be automated or outsourced to AI chatbots. It tells us that as a society, we will value human presence, we will value human therapeutic skill, and we will value human judgment in the spaces where we are our most broken and our most vulnerable and in our most need for help. It reminds us that progress is not about replacing our humanity with AI applications. It's about using our laws and our democracy to protect humanity from being erased, from eliminating that human connection that we all need and we all desire. We don't need to sit back and passively wait for these top down federal regulations to pass that are never going to come when every single state before has the opportunity to take action. We have the opportunity to take action in our own lives. Falling into that trap is exactly how we develop this crisis fatigue, where we look at every systemic issue, and there's a million of them. We feel completely paralyzed by the lack of control, by our lack of ability to make change, and we're just completely demoralized about any actual national progress as a country. So we end up sitting around and doing absolutely nothing. This true validation of the spirit behind Vermont's law doesn't have to sit or happen inside of the national capital. It happens on the ground through personal agency, our work and our pressure. I talk about this a lot on the show. We have to be our own saviors. The government is not coming to save us. It is us as individuals. It is us in our community coming together, supporting each other, and demanding more. It happens when we refuse to let people we care about rely on a digital screen with a chatbot for their literal emotional survival. I want to speak directly to every single person listening to my voice right now, whether you are currently sitting on a therapist's couch every week, or you've never stepped foot inside a counseling office, or whether you're actively thinking about reaching out for professional support for the first time in your life. Understand, respect, and fiercely protect the importance of human connection in the mental health healing process. If you are looking for help, do not settle for a chatbot. Do not allow yourself to replace the heavy, messy work of real interpersonal relationships that drive vulnerability with some sort of stupid AI conversation app that's calculating and repeating back to you what you want to hear based on everything that's ever happened on the internet. Reclaim your agency. Realize that your pain and your challenges deserve a real relationship. Your struggles deserve real empathy, and your story deserves to be heard by a therapist or a mental health counselor or a psychologist, ultimately a person who actually has the heart to listen to you. The ultimate protest against this culture that is forcing us into isolation and creating these digital experiences and digital bubbles is to show up for each other right now in real life, in the real world. So I encourage you, pick up your phone, call a friend you haven't spoken to in a while, send a text message of gratitude over, ask someone how they're really doing. Sit with someone you care about in their heavy thoughts and their heavy emotions. Listen to what they're saying. Listen and love without judgment. Remind them they're not alone. Build the authentic human connection with someone in your life because someone desperately needs it today, because this is how we build real safety, real community. And this is how we protect our collective wellness and protect the people that we love. And when we all protect somebody we love, everybody's being protected by somebody we love. So let's focus on this win for Vermont. Let's be sure to keep our humanity intact. Let's look out for one another, and let's keep our eyes wide open. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.